Do we have any provided paperwork today, or do we just go off of our own?
What was sent to us there? Yep. Exactly. It's 4 o'clock. Yes. Dr. Allen, are you ready over there? Everyone's a doctor with the masks. Okay. Well, we'd like to welcome everybody here to this Boundary Commission meeting. Kind of saddens me. We get more people to this than we do county councils. And I thought we had heated topics at the county councils. But we do welcome you here. I'm glad we have such a good crowd, and the other thing that we have opportunities like this to be able to come and be heard. So, well, we'll go ahead and everyone, I'll take a motion to approve the agenda.
Motion.
I'll second it.
Moved and seconded, and I guess I better hit the red button, right?
Yep.
Okay, and it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It's unanimous. Thank you. Okay, at this time, just before we open up the public hearing,
All these on green?
they should say green. Yeah, just hit the button right on top there. Is yours on top, Brady? Yeah, just push that button. Thank you. Okay, before we open up the public hearing, I want to also share with you a couple things. The Boundary Commission, we are an administrative body. This means the responsibility of the board is to determine if the annexation request meets the requirements of state code, not to determine if annexation is good or bad. And that may be, so hopefully we can kind of make sure that we address everything according to state code. So, and so at that point, we're going to open up the public hearing, but we'd first like to hear from a representative from Nibley who's protesting. And then after they are done, we'd like to hear a representative from Logan. And if you can kind of keep your remarks, right to the point and everything, that would be terrific, so we can keep this going and moving. Then after that, we'll open that up to anybody else. But we would ask that you would come up to the microphone. You first need to state your name. And anyone that, as you come up after that, please share things that have not already been said so that we can, again, keep things going and get right to the point rather than hearing a lot of redundancy on items. So we'll go with that point. So Mayor Dustin, are you speaking for Nibley?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Mask on or off?
That's completely up to you.
All right.
I am demasked. I've been on the road to Damascus a long time ago.
Take it off so that I don't hyperventilate inside there.
Good.
Thanks for hearing us out today. And I want to be clear right from the get-go that we understand the process. We understand where Logan and the developer are coming from, and we appreciate that position. We also appreciate the opportunity to come before this board and discuss some potential adjustments and why this is something that the board should weigh in on. I just put through it. Okay. First of all, it's my understanding that this is the only opportunity that we have to present information to the board pending the event of an adverse decision on the part of the board, and then it goes to district court. And so I need to get some stuff on the record just so that in the event that it goes to district court, we have the opportunity to discuss these things. First of all, the value of the property is the same regardless of which entity administers it, and that is one of the things that is considered as was the impact on county property taxes. Nibley's progress on, in fact, I brought a copy of our ordinance that is up for its final review by the Planning Commission. I'd like to, you guys, that should be approved by the Planning Commission on April 1st. It'll be taken up by the council, and all indications are the council will also approve it within the next 2 weeks. So as far as value goes, the property tax value of the county, it's a wash. we expect that passage to happen probably April 22nd or April 15th. I'm confident in that because for reasons that I'll get into in the presentation. Nibley's closed meeting minutes will also show that Nibley has made extraordinary efforts to keep this in Nibley, even to the extent of making an offer on the property of whatever the property owner could substantiate plus $1,000. That didn't work out for us. We were willing to take a $2 million loss on this because of the impact that it has on Nibley citizens and Nibley property taxes. So this is a really important issue to us. In fact, I feel like it's existential to our ability to function as a state. And I'll get into that one later. So our plan, by the way, in purchasing it was to annex, rezone it to essentially identical zoning to what Logan is doing, and then make that available as multifamily housing to the developers. So that didn't work out. So we're going to keep it all secret anymore. But I just want you to understand the lengths that Nibley was willing to go to in order to preserve our ability to administer our city. So just to give you kind of an overview of what we're going to talk about today, first of all, the context of the annexation petition area. Then our understanding of the petition law. Our attorney is here, Rob, will stop me and yell at me or yell at me afterwards for getting into the
John?
impact. Yes,
What we're looking at here is
Is
just
this one copy?
I'm sorry, that's 2 copies.
two
Two
copies.
copies.
Yep, 2 copies of the ordinance that's being.
Going to be looked at and possibly,
All right.
possibly
We didn't know if
approved.
it was, we were each taking a page and passing it down,
Yeah, sorry.
but it's
No,
two, okay,
Yep,
I'm gonna
there's
pass
2
it so you can
copies.
see it. Yeah, exactly.
Then we're gonna talk about Nibley City growth and impacts, and then we have a couple of proposed resolutions that we hope can get us to where we need to be. First, I don't know if this is gonna work or not, but I just wanted to show you why this is important to Nibley citizens. This is a kid traveling from this area to Nibley. Oh, that's how you do it. No, I just need it to play. Basically, he crosses the street, and he's in Nibley. I wish I could get that to him. Yeah, it was a gamble, didn't pay off. But the video is 5 seconds long. I have another video that we can watch if you like to, that shows the same travel technique to get to the closest park in Logan, and that takes about half an hour, but David did ask us to keep it short. So, I'll do that. I'm not gonna go through this, you guys know your job. But, our grounds for this petition and our grounds for this protest are the conflict with the annexation policy plan of another municipality. That gives us the grounds to call for this hearing, and we feel like it gives us the ability to ask for redress. The decision options, as we understand Utah code, are to approve the proposed annexation either with or without conditions, to make minor modifications to the proposed annexation and approve it either with or without conditions, or to disapprove the proposed annexation. We've got a couple of options in here that allow us to do that. Our primary request is requesting denial. However, we do have some proposed mitigations that would mitigate the harm to Nibley City. Our read and our understanding is that the law basically allows you to ensure that the citizens who pay taxes get value for those taxes, and that no city can use this to force costs on an adjacent city. The problem with the proposed annexation is that essentially annexation by Logan and rezone to this density cripples our ability to provide services within Nibley. The area is within our annexation declaration area, and historically, it's always been attached to Nibley City neighborhoods. The people who have lived here have always gone to church in Nibley, the kids have gone to school in Nibley, everybody's used parks in Nibley. Nibley has plowed those streets for as long as we can remember. In fact, there's been an ongoing discussion between Nibley and Logan about maintenance of 8th West. And Logan annexed right up to the edge of 8th West on the west side. Billville annexed right up to the edge of 8th West on the east side, and Nibley plows and maintains that road. There's nobody else to do it. So we have a historical interest in keeping this in our city. Going to the law, our understanding is that city boundaries should be drawn along the boundaries of school districts, boundaries follow city boundaries. All of these people are going to be part of the Nibley community. We believe they should be able to participate fully as members of that community. My biggest fear with this, I've got two. One is financial, and we can talk about that. My other biggest fear is that we're going to put somewhere between 6,000 and 8,000 people on 2200 West with no dedicated park space, with no plan for safe routes to schools, none of that. And those kids are going to go to those schools, and their parents are going to complain. You know, the Nibley parents will complain, and we're going to create this sense of otherness, where even as kids, they're going to feel like that they're a burden on that community. And that's not right. I know that's not what, I don't mean to imply that's what anybody intended, but unintended consequences are one of the things that we're here to watch out for. Yes, sir.
Is that mostly because these children will go to different schools? Is that what you're suggesting?
No, they're going to go to the same schools.
Okay.
Yeah.
So why you use the word difference, or they'll feel different? Explain that.
It's going to come down to taxation, because Nibley has 60 acres of parks within walking distance of these areas. And they're going to go to the park with their parents, and they're going to ask their parents why there aren't any parks on the other side of the street, and why there are parks on this side of the street. And it's going to slip out that those people are not paying taxes, and they're not paying their fair share for that recreation. And we already see that. You know, and I'm not, please don't misunderstand. I've got no problem with multifamily. I've got no problem with high density. I understand the problems that we face as a state with making sure that we've got housing for people. I understand that, and that's why we're pushing so hard as a council for this ordinance. But that's going to happen. Those discussions are going to happen because we're going to be in a position where parks that were designed for 6,000 people are now supporting somewhere in the neighborhood of 15,000 people. And they're going to get torn up, they're going to get chewed up, and that's going to come out in the community. And it doesn't need to. It doesn't need to at all. And then the bottom line is, this is across the street from our city. We've always considered it to be in our city. As far as underground utilities, that's a wash. We're all providing, you know, Logan's providing sewer there, Nibley's providing sewer there. Logan's providing water there, Nibley has water there. There's no difference in anything except for these areas that we're highlighting, but those differences are critical for our ability to function. So this is what we're talking about. In my communications with Mayor James, she indicated that this is my understanding of what they intend to pursue. And they're open to the people petition Logan for annexation into Nibley and rezoning into Nibley. So this is where all these numbers come from. The number of units is not yet determined because they haven't been rezoned and we don't have proposals. So the estimates are based on the density that was granted to the Strata Apartments, which are in the red area there. And then also the emails that we provided between myself, Mayor Gaines, and the Nibley Logan Boundary Commission. For this, we're looking at roughly 2,700 units and 140 acres. Based on what we're seeing from the U.S. Census Bureau, Logan averages 2.9 people per resident, so that's where all these numbers are coming from. So we're looking at 7,900 people in that 140 acres. Nibley is currently 7,500 people. And so that's why this is what we're worried about with overwhelming the city.
Say that again.
Yeah.
To back up just one sentence.
Nibley's population is currently about 7,500 people. We're looking at adding up to 7,900 people in this area if this goes through. And again, the concern is not adding those people. The concern is that it's the responsibility, it's not the responsibility of the municipalities to necessarily provide those social services, but we should be planning and zoning to make space so that those are available. There should be room, if we're gonna put this in here, we're talking about 2 elementary schools. The churches really don't count one way or the other, so we'll throw that out. But we should have room in here for 2 elementary schools, half of a middle school, and 90 acres of parkland, and none of that's provided for. So that's our concern. That's what we need to mitigate with this. Bottom line is, even this annexation, between this one and Strata, we're talking about adding 60 to 80% to Nibley's population. And per those emails, there's no plan of mitigation. Now, it's not Logan's job to invest in schools, obviously, because that's the county school district, and that tax increment does go to the county school district. That's not part of our argument. Our argument is that we still need to have provisions for safe routes to schools. Somebody's got to provide, there should be zoning that allows for probably 20 acres of elementary school in there that is not provided for and not planned for. And that 20 acres is some, the problem is that if we take on that burden, if Nibley takes on that burden without the tax base, which is really where those schools have to be built, now we've lost the potential to generate funds for those kids and all of the tax revenue for the crossing guards, for all that stuff, all of that flows north instead of down to where it ought to be. The school district is wonderful, but we pay for the crossing guards. We pay for the crosswalks. We pay to make sure that that stuff happens. And I'm not sure that that's been considered in this. Let's see, what else can I tell you? Per that conversation, or those conversations with Mayor Gaines, any park impact fees will be spent elsewhere. There's no plan to spend those south of 89. Schools and safe routes to schools, like I said, those are Nibley and the county's issue. And then I already talked about the intent of Logan to allow the annexations and rezones of those other open parcels in there. So, historical preservation, historical provision of services. This slide shows you what Nibley has for parks and schools within walking distance of these 2 areas. And so this is where I come up with the 60 acres of park space. We maintain all of the infrastructure in there that would be needed, and that includes sewer collection, snow removal, parks, school routes, crossing guards. We are the historical community. I should have left that out about the land grant. That was nice, but I was mad. So, but basically what it comes down to is we know these people are coming. We welcome them. We expect them to be here. Whether they come in under Logan or under Nibley, we have the same moral obligation to welcome them into our community. And we're going to do our best to do that. But it gets hard, when you run out of resources, what do? And to have all that tax base head north and to have this much impact stay south is just difficult. And like I said, I don't think that there was a nefarious plan. I think that a developer came to Logan and said, what do we do? And it was in both annexation areas, and Logan said, we'll do this. And it was worth more money than what we had on the books at the time. I think that's all it is. But like I said earlier, those unintended consequences are going to come back and bite Nibley, and they're going to bite us hard. So, what are we going to propose? We believe that the commission has the authority to keep the communities together and keep the taxes with the taxpayers. We do support the we support multifamily here. Like I said, I think we've got most of our council here, good bit of our planning commission, and I don't foresee an issue with this going through as far as the multifamily. So the property value is really it's neither here nor there. But we've got to have equity if we're going to have this happen. So our first and preferred outcome is just disapprove the annexation. I don't think it's going to make any difference to Logan. Logan's going to continue to grow and be strong, whether this is in Logan or not. It's not going to make any difference to the developer. The developer's going to have the opportunity to do exactly the same thing. They'll just do it under Nibley instead of under Logan. The difference will be that we will have the financial wherewithal to mitigate the impacts. That's the bottom line. And I feel like that is within your purvey. That's within your ability to make a decision on. Option 2 would be to approve the annexation with conditions. I proposed this with Mayor James before I brought anything, before we filed the protest, and it was not well received, but we've tried. I want you to know that we've tried. We've tried with the owner, we've tried with Logan City. This is our last resort. And what we would ask in the conditions is to require the sharing of impact fees and tax revenues between Logan City and Nibley to mitigate the impact. We feel like it'd be equitable since we're providing all the walkable park space to get 100% of the park impact fees and then 50% of the road impact fees. We also feel like that on an ongoing basis that we should receive a percent that's proportional to what Logan allocates in their annual budget for their park maintenance and street maintenance on that same scale. If we have that, we can deal with it, we think. If we have some fraction of that, we can look at it and see if we can work with it. But without those things, then the impact on Nibley is roughly, the initial impact on Nibley per our calculations is roughly $4 million in terms of the park impact fees. And then, but that doesn't bother me nearly as much as the ongoing operations and maintenance when all of a sudden we've got, 3,000 people trying to fit into a park on Thursday afternoon, and we've got program soccer games and things like that. We built these parks on the perimeter because we wanted to share them with the county. We just didn't expect this. So I think that's it. Yeah. Anybody have any questions or?
Yeah, I had, so what was Nibley's plans for that area as far as density? Or what were their zoning plans?
Before the strata apartments happened, we've had to be honest, Chairman, we've had to moderate our views a lot. When I came on as mayor, Nibley's general plan was half-acre lots or bust. In the last 7 years, we have grown to understand that the realities of the needs of people in the valley and the realities of the market don't really fit that. You can see what our plans were based on. This is what we had started to do. We put into place a planned unit development ordinance, and the PUD ordinance is we've basically got 1,200 units on the books for dealing with these types of things. The difference is that typically what we'll do in these, in a way that we were planning on dealing with the Campbell property was higher density, not as high as what, it's a numbers game at this point. Our preference would be more like 12 units to the acre because we feel like that gives us the ability to preserve more open space. But at this point, we're going to have the impact from the strata apartments. We're going to have all of those 40 acres of units, 700 and something units. And so if we put 40 acres of multifamily on the Campbell property, then basically what that means is that our tax revenue and our impact fees get cut in half. But I feel like I can manage with that. I'm not excited about it, but I can manage with that. So as far as what our plans were, sometimes you don't get to do what your plans were. You just play defense. And alternative, and that would be to just, because we run some numbers, and the long-term impact on Nibley is substantial, to the point that, we might be better off to just disincorporate annexing Logan, because then we have at least a block of 15,000 people that could vote for stuff. But, it's a big hit to the budget. It's a big deal.
Other questions?
I may have some later, but
Okay.
Well, thanks for letting us come up and talk to you. I haven't been this nervous since my first day on the job as a mayor. So,
Thank you.
appreciate the patience.
Yeah, thank you.
Representative from Logan?
Appreciate your time today, Energy Commission. I'm really kind of at a loss. I'm not sure where to start. We had a filed protest that I responded to, and now I'm getting a whole different set of objections. And so I want to be respectful of your time. My intent was not to go over my written material. And I guess I should introduce myself. I'm the city attorney for Logan. I'm asked to represent the city in this matter. We've also got Mike Dissimoni, our community development director. We've also got the property owners here, which I think it's important that they be heard from. This is being couched as Logan versus Nibley. That's not what this is about at all. I mean, this is really a property rights issue. They came to Logan and asked to be annexed. We're just honoring that request. I guess the question I have, my intent was to focus on what authority you had and the role of this commission. I can address all of the things that were brought up, but I feel like this commission is in a position to start deciding where hookup fees and impact fees go. I mean, that's just way outside this commission's authority. In the reality, this is just a simple annexation. If you look at the map, and maybe we'll pass those out. This is property that's been in Logan's annexation plan since 2007. Nibley included it, even though they said they've always considered this Nibley. It wasn't added to their annexation plan until 2018. I think that's out here. So it's a little hard to complain that this is in their annexation plan when they brought it 15 years later to put it into theirs. This isn't something that is land grab by Logan. Again, it's been in our annexation plan since 2007. It's just barely coming up for annexation now because annexation of the lot is driven by property owners. We didn't go out and solicit this project. We just take them as they come. So let me just address this a little bit regarding this annexation. So it is within our Logan's annexation plan. It follows a natural border between the two cities, right along 2200 South. We're not reaching in to the other side of the street to try to take a piece from Nibley. Logan already has adequate utilities available to serve the property. Logan provides all of the municipal type services, including fire and police. So we're more than capable of providing all the services, and the property owners requested to come into Logan. I mean, that's just that simple. And really, there's no, and Nibley hasn't brought up any technical reasons why this can't come into Logan. It's just because of the impact. But I think it's so unfair to appeal to the emotion of the board members or commission members saying, oh, this is all the impact is going to fall on Logan. That presupposes that Logan won't put any parks in. That presupposes that Logan won't put any streets in. We don't even know what this is going to be yet. We know what the proposed zoning is, which is 20 units per acre, the same as all the property going to the west. But we don't know what's going to go there. But I think our track record in Logan shows that we do put in parks, we do put in the streets. And in fact, where did those maps go?
do we have extras? There we go.
These maps?
Yeah, those show the proposed roads that are going to go in with the city right now. So you've got 2100 South, 9th West is indicated on there. And then our code requires that there be 20% set aside for So to suggest that we're gonna build that to the absolute maximum and then require Nibley to provide all the parks, all the crossing guards, I don't even know where that's coming from. I mean, if it's in Logan City, we would provide all of those things. And again, we have a track record of providing those services. This isn't like we're some new city that's just creating, now we're going out and grabbing a bunch of things. We have more parks than probably anybody in the county. And we've welcomed other cities, people from the county to come and use those parks. I think it's unrealistic to expect that you can have common boundaries with a municipality and that nobody's going to cross the street. We get that. But Nibley residents have historically come across and used our parks, and we think that's great. That's how, hopefully, a community works. This isn't about a tax grab. This is residential property. It's actually, would be far more valuable if it was commercial or industrial, based on property taxes. So this isn't about a property tax grab at all. We don't intend to push any of the burden onto Nibley. We will carry all of that burden, just like we do with all of the other areas within the city of Logan. So I think it's so unfair to make it sound like we're gonna bankrupt the city of Nibley. Now, I also think it's unfair to suggest that, let me grab this note that I had, or letter that was sent by Sean Dustin. And I'm talking about they've changed their thinking and want to have multifamily housing. And to his credit, he does say that, but I mean, I'm just quoting, and I'll provide copies just so everybody has it. There, Dustin, you know what it is, but I'll give you a copy too.
We have that one, don't we?
I do appreciate Mayor Dustin at least being forthright about this. It's not about an annexation that's illegal. It really comes down to Nibley would rather have it in Nibley than in Logan. And I get that. I don't fault them for that at all. But this isn't about anything other than that. It's just we prefer to have it in Logan. And if you go, and this is just kind of a letter to his, apparently to citizens saying, here's why we have to change our thinking on our zoning and start to allow multifamily housing. You could read it on your own. I just wanted to drop down to the very last, the solution. What I'm going to propose is going to be hard for many of us to swallow. We can't force landowners to build at less density because they will just annex into Logan. Let's see. We can't get Logan to share revenue, but we can fight back. And I think that's interesting. I don't see this as a fight, but apparently Nibley does. By offering the landowners the same deal that Logan offers. We're going to get the development regardless. We are going to get the impact regardless. Logan can take the tax dollars and spend them in Logan, or we can put the ordinance in place and work with the developers ourselves. We get the development, but we get it on our terms, including open space. The taxes from the property will benefit both the people paying them and the people living nearby. So really, this is all it comes down to, is just, they want the property tax instead of Logan. Is that really where this boundary commission wants to go and start making decisions on which city should annex and which city should get the property tax? Really, the only issue is you've got a proposed annexation for you. It's not whether it would be better in Millville, or better in Nibley, or better in Logan. Is the proposal before you, the proposed annex before you, does it meet the code? That's really the only decision for this body. All of these other things, great policy discussions, but this is not a policy board, as Chairman Erickson pointed out at the very beginning. This is an administrative body. The other thing I wanted to point out is just that next sentence. For years, your city council has fought hard to figure out how to deal with the pressure from Logan and the state legislator for affordable housing. We never wanted or intended to have a multifamily ordinance. So much for equitable distribution of community resources and obligations. I mean, they have no multifamily currently, so they have some across 2200 South. Is that too much to ask of any city? I'm not asking them to even put it in their city, even though the state code requires that they allow it. We're not asking for that. Just, can they tolerate some affordable or multifamily housing across the street? Like, to me, it just doesn't seem like that much of an ask. It's not a big burden on their city. And again, I'm only the city attorney, but I can make the commitment that we are not going to push the obligation of the cost of that development onto the city of Nibley, unless they view people using their park as that cost. We can't stop that. I suppose Nibley could put up a sign, residents only, but that's, beyond that, I do not see any additional cost to the city of Nibley. So, I'd like to have the property owners speak, because I think it's important that we recognize this is about property owners' rights. Annexation law is driven by the property owner. They get to request, a city can deny the request, but we can't force, unless it's an island, we cannot force incorporated property into the city.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Go ahead. You'll take the question.
Can you give us your understanding or your knowledge in the proposed area? I don't know if we could pull a map back up, but where the current school district boundaries are, and in your mind, how this is going to be dealt with due to the school districts?
I think that's a great question. School districts' boundaries have not changed since 1996 by annexation. It used to be when you annex, the boundaries changed. But obvious problems with that is it's hard for school districts to be responsible to educate these students and then have long-term planning, and then all of a sudden they lose land. And so they changed the law to only the school districts can change their boundaries. So this will have no impact whatsoever on the school district, other than, obviously, as property develops, more students are going to be there. But I think that's the interesting thing here. This isn't about, we shouldn't have the development there. Mayor Dustin's admitted, hey, we're going to allow them to do the same thing that Logan's going to allow them to do. So it's happening. That's not the issue. It's just, is it going to be in the city boundary, Logan city boundaries, or Nibley city boundaries? Not whether or not these impacts are coming. And we know what's going on with the housing crisis in Utah. We're growing. This property is going to be developed. So when it comes to the school district, yes, it's going to impact Cache County School District because it's in Cache County School District, but these boundaries do not change the school districts at all. And if you look at the code carefully, it says it's, the exact language actually is just more of a guideline, not a specific. Where possible and reasonable. 403. If practical and feasible, the boundaries of an area proposed for annexation shall be drawn along the boundaries of existing districts and special service districts for sewer, water, and other services along the boundaries. None of those exist. Or of school districts whose boundaries follow city boundaries, or school districts adjacent to school districts whose boundaries follow city boundaries. We don't have that. Cache County's boundaries do not follow city boundaries. Logan City School District does not follow city boundaries. We got a huge chunk of Logan City now that's in Cache County School District. So just no impact. This annexation has no impact on the boundaries of the school districts. So,
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
may I ask a question?
You please. Yeah, you bet.
Mr. Helsley, I just want to,
Kimber, you know John, I'm sure, yeah.
we're well acquainted. I anticipate getting some questions from the Boundary Commission. And on this issue, we'll just tell you as how I read the code and want to see if we read it the same way. That while in most cases, the Boundary Commission would just be checking to see if the statutory checkboxes are there, that this is perhaps the one area where they do then become a policy-making board, where you have section 415, subsection 8, that says, in considering protests, the commission shall consider whether the proposed annexation complies with all the statutory requirements and the annexation policy plan of the proposed annexing municipality, and B, conflicts with the annexation policy plan of another municipality. And where it's in both policy, that this is the one area where they then exercise discretion and make a decision about what they feel is best.
Correct.
So although you've said this is not what the Boundary Commission does, is make policy or make these what is best decisions, you'd agree that this is the one area where they do make their own decision about what is best?
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly with that, but again, to my earlier point, this was in Logan's annexation plan in July, it's in my written material, of 2007. Is it really equitable to have a city come 13 years later and whatever, 2018, create that conflict and then complain about the conflict? I mean, that just seems...
I understand the policy argument that you're making, but I just wanted to check and see whether we were going to be crosswise on the authority of the...
No, I mean, I think they have the authority to look at that, but I think you have to look at the criteria. If not, the city could simply just include the entire county in their annexation plan, and then you would have a conflict for every annexation that comes along. So I think the intent has to be looked at there.
My question though is, you know, this idea of approve with conditions. Again, I look at something like that and I'm like, is this group here even, do we even know enough to create any conditions at all for something like this? I mean, do we sit down and say, okay, I mean, it seems like outside of our scope and even knowledge-based to figure, okay, let's half here, half there, let's split it this way. It seems very much outside of this body's ability to even make a decision on that. So is it really almost just an approve or disapprove? Or is it?
That's my follow-up question to him, is that the next section of the code does allow for approval with conditions and doesn't put any statutory constriction on what the conditions can be. And that's setting aside, are they equipped to make certain conditions, but the statute does not limit.
But the conditions done historically here and throughout the state is so that it meets the code or boundary issues, like instead of going on the west or east side of a road, you have to go to the middle of the road for access issues and maintenance issues. So those type of tweaks in the boundaries, those are the type of conditions that historically are made. But policy decisions about, well, I think this is better in Logan or Nibley, those aren't the kind of conditions that I think the statute even contemplates, and I've never seen it exercised that way. It's, to me, so you don't create a peninsula, an island, you reject, address street issues, that type of thing.
So when have you seen a condition? When have you ever seen historically an approval with a condition? Or an attorney here speaking as well. When have you ever seen that?
I think we had one with Millville a couple years back and that was the issue, bringing the property line to the middle. I mean, the county used to allow annexations just as they were, but what happened is they left, cities would annex everything but the roads and leave the county to maintain those roads. So they changed the policy 5 or 6 years ago, maybe a little longer, but it was under when Josh Reinhardt was here. And it was my suggestion to him to do that, is make municipalities annex to the center line of the road. So you don't have to maintain these in the middle of two cities.
And Mr. Housley, could that also fit that as the minor modifications rather than conditions that will approve it with the minor modification that you gotta go across the road? That's not really a
Yeah, I
condition.
mean, it could fit, but those are the type of changes that a boundary commission would do with conditions or modifications. When you get outside that, you're really talking policy issues that should be done by the elected body.
Sure.
Not at the commission level. Just a couple of other things. I mean, the plowing of roads, we want to do our fair share of plowing roads. We tried to initiate meetings with Millville and Nibley so we can work out those issues. Maintaining the roads is not going to be an issue. We've got a full-service public works department. Not only do we help take care of our own city, we help many of the other cities, including Nibley, during difficult times. So maintaining the roads, Logan's going to do that. try to touch everything point by point. I just generally want to say a lot of the stuff raised. I'm not diminishing them as important issues, but again, it's just not within the purview of this body. Just, does this annexation meet the code? And with that, I wanted to have the property owners at least address some of the issues that I saw them writing down and thought maybe they had a few things to address.
Mark Daines, I represent the current ownership group of the property. We started this process back in December with the previous ownership group, or the previous owner, which was Paul and Leanne Kimball. And in our discussions with them, their express interest was for this property to be annexed into Logan City. We started that process with them, since acquired the property from them, and our ownership group's express interest is to continue that process of annexation into Logan City.
I got a question there. First, of Mark. Now, that was the landowner requested that they go to Logan.
Yeah, we started the annexation process with the previous landowner.
And that's Paul Campbell?
Paul and
Yeah,
Leanne Campbell.
okay. My question was at that point, so is this was it their ambition to definitely never to go to Nibley? Or did they approach Nibley first?
We actually approached, we contacted both cities at the time of looking at acquiring this property. Looked at our options. We realized, we checked both cities to see what annexation plans it was in. We realized it was in both Nibley
And
and
what each city allowed in that area?
and then what the city would allow in that area. And with the previous owners and with our ownership group that wanted to acquire it, our express interest combined was to go into Logan City.
Okay.
I'm Paul Campbell, so I'm the previous owner of the property. A little bit of history. I said previous owner was my father before me. I think he acquired the property in the early 70s. So it's the place I grew up. This was my home as a child, all the way through. I moved away for a few years, came back, acquired the home from my father, remodeled it, where he lived with us up till he passed. So a couple things I just wanted to address that I heard mentioned. One was that, the people historically there were attached to Nibley. I can tell you that's not the case. I grew up there. We were Collegeville. People ask me today, I will still say Collegeville. Wasn't Nibley. I went to school in Wellsville, in River Heights. That's where the schools were located. It wasn't until much later. My church, Collegeville. It wasn't until the last probably 4 years that became part of Nibley when they redrew some of the church boundaries. So historically, we were just county. And for a long time, we wanted to stay just county. Over the years, with my father before me, Logan, Nibley, and then when Zollinger's kind of put a lot of stuff in the middle, they came to our border, they hit us up. So all three cities, over time, wanted us to annex. 2 commissioners ago, it was Lynn Lemon, really hit us hard and said, you need to be in a city. We don't want to maintain the road anymore. You need to be in a city. And we resisted. I liked going out and hunting pheasants on my property. I can still do so because we were in the county. As things grew in around us, it became harder and harder to be able to farm. And the piece across the street, which we sold earlier, that was annexed into Logan, that was a hard part for my father to deal with. This was the property that came from Reuben Young to our family. But we realized we couldn't farm there anymore. About got hit crossing the road with cattle. Hayes West just became too busy, so we couldn't be there, we couldn't be split. So we sold the first part, that went into Logan. They talk about middle of the road, annexation was middle of the road. Opportunity came up to sell the rest of it, about a year later, which allow us to kind of move our operations to a, you know, more rural area within the valley here. And when it came up, you know, as to where, I mean, personally, it made sense to me with, on the west side of the road was in Logan, it tied in. You know, we are, if you look at the last bastion of county there. That 35 acres is it. That's all that's left in county right now. And so, you know, we looked at it, said with what's on the west side, that just kind of matched up. And probably it is because that's where the rest of my property historically was. And so it matched into being part of the Logan, you know, going that route with it. So, you know, we've heard a lot of speculation on the property. You know, I've worked with the new owners. I can't even tell you what's going in there. You know, it's still being looked at. And I think the board, you know, what the commission's looking at is, do we meet the requirements? I think, personal opinion, landowners ought to have a good say in what happens to the property. As a previous owner, that's what I want, heard from the current owners. I personally just feel that probably bear more weight than anything if we're meeting the requirements of the law. So, thank you. Questions?
Would you agree that, you know, you said landowners should have more of a say. Maybe the state code should have the say, right?
Well, that's why I said, I think landowners should have the greatest say if it meets the requirements of the state law.
Right.
Okay.
That's it for us. I just wanted to, if there's any questions in the material.
I've got one. The question I had was, you mentioned 2007, all of a sudden you desired, hey, you want to bring that into Logan, made that part of your plan. How about prior to that? Because I know there's a lot of agreements between cities in other areas that have been going on since, I think since Brigham was here, because when I was a kid, Smithfield to Richmond, Crow Mountain Road's always been the boundary. And, you know, we've never even, as soon as it felt different when you went on the other side of Crow Mountain Road out there. And it was Richmond. But it just always was the boundary, and that's just kind of how it always was. And I don't know if anything has ever been written, but what was thought at that time between, and the College Ward issue that came up, I always thought that was College Ward, but they never did create, you know, their own township or their own, to be able to become an entity. So before 2007, share that.
Just a little background, an annexation plan wasn't required until 2002. Prior to that, some cities, we did have a plan, but it was not mandated.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until 2002 that it actually became law that all cities had to have that in order to annex. But historically, I'd say up until it was added, there was really not much thought of even ever Logan going into that area. But as annexations happened, slowly it made sense once we got across the road. And so that's when it was included. It was in 2007 when, at that point, it made sense. And I think it's important to recognize Nibley, they've done the same thing. Initially, we put in the sewer line on 2200 South, and Nibley was never going to come to that far north. But things changed for them, and so they increased it to 2200 South. And again, just recently, added across the street. But that pretty much left the station. This is the last parcel left. So literally, for Nibley to do that, it's going to be creating a little, it's not technically an island or a peninsula, but that's essentially what it would do. Within Logan, at least we square it off with that natural road as a boundary. But we spent a lot of time, and I really didn't want to turn this into Nibley versus Logan. I really hope that you just look at this and say, forget those things. Does the annexation proposal before us meet the code? I mean, that's really all you have to decide. So unless there's other questions, that's it for Logan.
Thank you. Now we will open it up to others. Again, try not to reiterate items that have already been shared, but it is open for anybody, and try to keep your remarks maximum 3 minutes or less. Go ahead. Just state your name when you get up there.
You haven't officially voted to open the public hearing if you want to
Oh, we got to vote on that? I thought we just opened that as a
Mr. Chairman, I'd make a motion, we open the public hearing.
I'll second.
second it. Okay, is moved and seconded? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Unanimous. Thank you. Go ahead and just state your name and then share that.
My name is Wendy Droby, and I'm glad you have the map up. I live right, south of the Campbell's property. Thank you. I live right in here. Seeing all the development, we know it's gonna go in, and we're not planning on fighting it, but, all of those children will go to my children's elementary school right there in Nibley, and I know that won't change no matter what city, but, also being part of the city's, friends group for the recreation, I help, volunteer a lot of my time to help with the children's, different, Easter themes and Halloween things and all sorts of things that we hold at the city park, which is right here, is where we hold all the big main events. And of course, other cities are welcome to join us. But one of these things that this is gonna do to have so many units right here on the border, we're gonna get a lot of children, even unaccompanied by parents, to these activities, which is not a big problem, but it would be nice to be able to have funds to be able to supply these wonderful activities for people. I know that with there was an issue lately with the Firefly referendum, which is a different piece of property, and I know that is why the developer has decided to go with Logan instead of Nibley's, because the people were very against this particular development, not the one that is in question, but the one with 374 units, because it's lining up to people's properties, and anyway, with the water table, it's going to flood their neighborhoods when it's built, or their basements, I mean. This is not the case with the Campbell's development. People that I know of, I was very active in this referendum with this other development. I know that none of us plan on fighting this development, and the Campbells have previously told some of my neighbors as well that they wanted to go with Nibley, but that there were some pickaxe citizens that were fighting developments. Anyway, I'm sure not very much of this matters or is played into your decisions, but as being a person who's going to be right next to all of this development, I'm hoping that the development can go with Nibley so that we can have safe walking for the schools, so that we can have it built in a way so that it can be really well built into our city and flow really well. The 363 units in the red right there, I see a lot of children already walking along the road past the 197 units. And this is a very, very, very narrow road where cars shouldn't go as fast as they do. But there are children, they don't have a safe route to school. So when the attorney says that they always do that and that they always plan that, this is not the case so far with the 367 units. There is not a safe route planned for those children to walk to school. Walking towards my children's school, which is going to be their school as well, which is great. But they're not putting in those safety measures for these children. And anyway, so this is the concern that I have with these, and I know that Nibley's done a good job at trying to plan for these safe routes for the children's school. That was a big thing that the mayor had brought up with the 374 units of, are there safe walking distance routes to the schools? Do we have the crosswalks planned? And this is not the case with the 367 units that is already currently built and being built. And I just hope that I just really hope that the Nibley citizens will not just be left in the dust with this. I think that it would be much gonna welcome them either way, but it would be much better if that can go towards helping, Nibley City with supporting these people.
Thank you. Anyone else?
All right, so my name's Tom Bernhardt. I'm on the Nibley City Council, and I also live in that neighborhood, basically, where Wendy Droege talks about. I've known Paul for, maybe, I don't know, 5, 6 years or somewhere in there. Really, the only thing, the only different thing that I would like to highlight is, I know, is it Housley? So Mr. Housley was talking about 2200 South kind of being that natural border, but we also haven't taken into account 800 West and where that border is. I think, you know, if we look at like Nibley, you know, we reached across the highway many years before I got involved in Nibley city politics, you know, across 89, 91, which I think was probably not a good thing for us to have done, but that's the decision that was made, so we have some commercials that sits over here. It's kind of the same thing here, because you have, you know, where you have 800 West, on the east side of 800 West, you got Millville, and then you have, you know, a little bit of, well, probably we'll have a little bit of Logan, but, you know, it just seems for me to make more sense to draw that line along, you know, 800 West and have that be included in the Nibley. And from a unique perspective, if you go back and look at every single, the mayor talked about the plan unit development, we call it the RPUD ordinance. I'm probably, well, not probably, I know I'm the only council member that has voted against every single one of them. But obviously, you know, like I've learned over the last several years that, you know, there's a tremendous amount of pressure for housing, right? And you know, what we see at Strata, that obviously doesn't fall under affordable housing. That's just, you know, temporary housing. But whether, you know, what goes in there or whatnot doesn't matter. But from my perspective, I'm way more supportive of exploring, you know, the ordinance that's gone through, that's working through its way through planning and zoning than I have been before, because I've learned a lot through this whole Firefly referendum and whatnot. So that's all I got.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I'm Norman Larson. I'm also on the city council. I'm a resident of Nibley, but if it was as simple as just checking boxes, we wouldn't need a committee. We wouldn't need you guys here. We would just check the box and be done. So I appreciate your effort of listening to both sides. Either way, they're going to be in the city. So, like I said, Nibley is proposing the exact same, so there's not a cost difference for the developer there, other than we really value the open space. And to be honest, I'm excited that Logan's going to put parks, because the 367, there's not as much space. There's a little dog park, but I don't see as much park space. If so, why people are crossing the street to the others? So I appreciate your time putting this considering, and then value more, because like they said, the impact to Nibley is huge. The impact to Logan, this is their outskirts. Even when they had the EMS, they wanted to draw a line, because if they're going too far out, they complained about the delivery times, whereas this is right here in Nibley. Thanks.
Okay.
So I'm Dave Lowerson. I am also on the Nibley City Council. This is hard to hear me probably. I grew up about a foot above your head, Chairman, on the map behind you. So similar to Mr. Campbell, this is the area I grew up in, and there were no houses here, right? This was county, like he described. And we're all used to those good old times. However, I think that on a pure, like as you mentioned, that this commission, their job is to look at it and does it legally fall within. And I agree with both attorneys when they say that I think this is one of those occasions where this commission's ability to check boxes can expand a little bit. Because I think that this county and this commission and the county itself and all the community in this valley have a determination to plan well and to create a community that everyone feels welcome and invited in. So I do think that, on purely checking boxes, that you do have the right to make these kind of decisions and talk a little more policy-wise. And I would hope that you do that. I think this is an opportunity for the county and you as a commission to stand up and show the leadership that historically, if you look at what Nibley has provided when trying to face these issues, they have open space. The three recent ones that have been alluded to require open space. We built and put a significant amount of money into Firefly Park there to keep the valley feeling like the county and to keep it feeling like the area that we all grew up in. And unfortunately, I would say that Logan hasn't shown a record of doing that. And the evidence is that big red spot there that Norm just talked about. There's no, it's all concrete houses and little open space and park space. And it doesn't have the inviting and county feel that we want and recreation that these people need to remain well. And so I appreciate your time, and I do think that you have an opportunity to show some leadership and help us make a good county.
Lyle Thornley. This is a very simple decision to make. The situation is that it is in Nibley's spot on the map. Nibley City should be the one that controls the future of that property. It is way to the south of Logan. It is right at center in everything that's going on in Nibley. I have faith in the Nibley City Council and the Nibley Mayor that they will stand up for and do everything possible to make that project a good thing for the people there. I do not have similar faith in Logan City. And the reason why is because it's Nibley's. It's right there. It's that simple. You've got to trust the people that live there, that are already there, the parks, everything that's there. That has to be protected, and this group is the one that will see that the needs of Nibley citizens are met.
I'm sorry, sir, could you please state your name for the recording?
Lyle Thornley.
Thank you.
Any others?
I'd make a motion we close the public hearing.
Is there a second? Moved and seconded, we close the public hearing. Thank you very much for your comments. We'll now open it up for discussion amongst the commission here.
May I ask some clarification? And those of you, I looked this up on the county map, so I want to make sure I'm understanding. This road, let me get my bearings, right here is 8th West.
Yes.
Correct? This road right here is where the Nibley city boundaries currently go. On the map that I looked at in my office, this property still showed county, has not been annexed. So we're going to leave this little island here. I have to laugh when I see the code and it says no islands.
No islands.
Do you know how many we've got around this county? A zillion.
I know.
Okay, so this little piece is in no city, but the Nibley city boundaries go like this. Logan city boundaries run along 8th West and west. So all of that you see up there is in Logan City. Is that correct? This is Millville. If we wanted to square things up, it'd make sense for us to come to here and throw that into Millville. This would be Nibley. I mean, this commission doesn't work on squaring up, unfortunately. I like straight lines just like anybody else does, but I want to make sure we all understand that because this property is still in the county. There are a few over here that are still in the county as well that have not been annexed into any city. And Millville, as they said, goes clear down, but then Logan's on this side and Logan goes clear out to Ted's on 3,200, I think, along the highway. So it jigs and jogs, but just so we're all familiar with where those boundaries are. So the reason Nibley could annex is because it's adjacent, it's contiguous. Logan could annex because it's contiguous, and Millville could annex because it's contiguous. So any of the three, under the law, could annex. It doesn't leave an island or a peninsula. So that's kind of what happens. Okay? Want to make sure I was on the same page with everybody else.
Okay. Other comments? Questions? John?
I just wanted to tell you my view of your role since it's been brought up. As I read the code, and I don't mean to be making a comment on the merits one way or the other, but just on your role, because I do have feelings about you understanding and exercising it. And this is how I view it. That ordinarily, it's left to the landowner to request annexation. No one can be forced to annex. And if you check the boxes, you're in. When the land is in more than one municipality's annexing area, that the landowner still initiates, but then if there's a protest, then it does come to you, and the code contemplates that you exercise some judgment as to whether it's a good thing or the best thing, or that it is no longer just, did they check the boxes? And part of exercising your judgment could be to say, we want to put the most weight on where the landowner requests to go. But that's not because they've just checked the boxes, but that's because that's the judgment that you would make. And I read the other section that I don't believe that the code puts a limit on conditions that can be imposed, and that the things like whether to go across the road or not, that's where the code talks about that you can make minor modifications to the proposed annexation. In my mind, that's the kind of minor thing. I acknowledge that I've not heard of these kinds of conditions that are being proposed here, but I don't see anything in the code that would prevent them either. So I think you really are sitting as a policy-making body in a case like this one, and that yes, you certainly consider where the landowner is asked to go. You can't put it into Nibley. Then they'd have to go through the process to go into Nibley. But I do think you have broad discretion to exercise judgment in a case like this.
Can I ask you a question? You used the word judgment. We can use judgment, but what would that be based on? Judgment based on, and decision-making based on what we hear from them off emotional, and even really relevant to them ideas on what they want, or is it judgment based on the code, or a mixture of both? So there's my first question is, when you use the word, we can use our judgment based on what? I mean, that's a very tough word, phrase.
They still have to
make your judgment based on.
They still initially have to meet all of the code requirements.
Let's assume they do. Then can this body still make a judgment based on emotional and personal desires?
The way I read the code is yes, because otherwise that wouldn't be a consideration.
Right.
The code would not include considering that it's in someone else's area as well.
And one more question.
It would just leave you with, they check the box.
When we use the word, does it meet the code? The word meet is an interesting word. Because the word meet could mean, there must be parts of the code that are met that are looser than other parts of the code that are met, right? So what stamps it saying that absolutely meets the code, and this pretty much meets the code, and this one, that's a hard.
When I've used meet the code today, in my mind that is requirements like is the proposed annexation area contiguous to the municipality who's annexing it? Those are,
And
where you
those are
can
big red
definitively
check,
say yes
check,
or
check.
no.
Is there any of them that you think it meets it loosely, but will go with meets or,
The only one that, in my mind, as I read through the list, that you could say.
where we could use
exercise
judgment, right? Where we could use judgment
is
using that word,
where
right?
is the proposed annexation, you know, it can't be for the sole purpose of acquiring municipal revenue, or for the sole purpose of retarding another municipality from
Okay.
annexing the same. There's been no claim that that's why this is happening, so you don't even have to go into that gray area, because unless Nibley gets back up and makes that claim, but they haven't made that claim. So it really is just this nebulous thing where I believe the code gives you discretion and then no guidance. It's in both it's in both cities' areas, and then sets it in your lap.
May I ask a follow-up question? Our responsibility is dealing with the annexation into Logan City. And all of the statutory things deal with that. Did they file properly? Is it contiguous? Does it create an island? All of those kinds of things. How do we separate from annexation the objections, I believe, to how the property is going to be used? If we didn't know that, if this was merely a question of this land coming into Logan, and no one knew what the zoning was, no one knew that it was planned for all these, how do we separate the objections to the land use or zoning and the annexation, which the Boundary Commission deals with? How do we separate those?
You can just, I haven't thought about that question, so as I think off the cuff, you can choose not to separate them and say, well, we know what the proposal is, and so it's in our purview here to consider the whole picture. Or you could say, but that's not part of what I'm going to consider. I'm going to consider, does it draw the line straight? If I didn't know, where would I put it? And you could just do that. Again, I'd come back to the, as I read the code, this is a deliberate choice by the legislature to say, even if you've checked all the boxes, when it overlaps with somebody else's, we want another body to have a second look at it. And then they don't tell you what to look for, other than we want you to take a second look.
John, is there ever, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Is there ever a situation like this that comes to a body like this where all the boxes to meet code are not checked?
Yes.
Yes.
And so
Yes.
that,
Leads in on this.
so that obviously, we see a great need for this body to say, the box isn't checked or it's very loosely checked. Now let's use some discretion and some, in your words, judgment.
And I think discretion is the better.
Discretion.
You've got discretion to decide to be the second.
But if all the boxes are checked, you're suggesting state law also says there's still judgment
Yes.
that you can go beyond and say we'll create our own rule or our own decision even outside of the check boxes.
And I'm not a judge that's going to make that decision, but in advising you, that's the only way I can read the code. Code would not read the way it does.
Can you read it again?
In considering protests, the commission shall consider whether the proposed annexation complies with the requirements of section 402 and 403, and those are the checkbox
Okay, so
sections.
whether it complies, okay,
And the annexation policy plan of the proposed annexing municipality, does it fit in Logan's plan?
okay,
B, conflicts with the annexation policy plan of another municipality.
okay, let's stop there and talk about that, so I understand what that means legally.
You can consider whether it conflicts
With
Nibley's
plan.
And it does.
And it does.
We have testimony. We
Did it?
had a plan many years ago. We have a plan a few years ago. It's conflicting. They're both claiming the same
So you
property.
can consider that.
Got a question on that.
Got it.
There's no recognition, so Logan says whatever, 2007, and that it's in the plan in 2018, that gap of time, there's no standing for that. The law doesn't make any difference. It's in both plans as of right now, and so the history is
fact that it-
disregarded.
Well, the fact that it's in both plans right now puts it in front of you to consider. But you can consider that history.
But the law doesn't say that Logan has a better claim because they were 10 or 11 years.
There's not a
claiming.
default yes or no on that under the
So-
law. That's what you're thinking.
So it just says that as of today, they're in both, and so it's got standing.
Yeah.
Might I say, in all the years I've served and others of you may, I would tell you that more city plans overlap than don't. That is not uncommon. I think always, because they're planning. I mean, to me, it's a master plan, that's kind of where you're going, and it's not uncommon to see those overlapping. That's
And
very
all
common.
these things, I believe, you're welcome to weigh. When it went into which plan? The property owner wants it in Logan versus in Nibley. You're welcome to weigh all of those things, but you have a role now to weigh them and exercise some discretion or judgment.
Kathleen, sorry.
There's one other thing that's not in effect here, and it says if the annexation includes urban development, which it does, which we have testimony of, right? Will it have an adverse tax consequence on the remaining unincorporated area of the county, which it doesn't?
So, since no one's raised that, I've not researched it, and maybe Mr. Housley has. My initial read is, there's no urban development there now. This isn't talking about what may happen in the future, it's talking about what's.
But we had testimony that that's what would happen. That's what is planned.
But the code reads, if the proposed annexation includes urban development. And an annexation, you annex ground.
Right.
You don't annex a plan. And
Okay.
so there's no urban development there now.
But
That's my guess.
the remaining part of that is that there is no consequence on the remaining unincorporated.
But you don't get to that if there's no urban development.
Okay.
And I don't believe, do you agree that there's no urban development?
Yes, urban development is defined, and trust me, there is no urban development.
Yeah, that's my, so I don't think C applies here. C does not apply here.
And Kathleen, you
Yes.
suggest that you've hardly ever, I mean, it's hard I haven't seen, 100-year history of this, but you're suggesting it's almost always the case where two municipalities always have, that are conflicting like this, always have a plan.
Almost always. I think both, that Mayor Dustin was, and Kimber was, both were saying, yes, that's not uncommon. That's been my experience. I think only once did I see, and that was the Millville annexation. Initially, that was not in Millville's plan. That was the first time I ever saw anything like that. That's been a number of years ago. And I think cities are getting better at making their plans as those laws have come. I think they're trying really hard to plan.
Most cities have a plan. And if they
Absolutely.
don't, there's a problem.
And I think they're trying to fine tune it
Sure.
and really know what they want where. Absolutely.
So again, I don't want to be perceived as weighing in on what the outcome ought to be. But
No, this is helpful.
I do want to provide that guidance on what your role is in this case.
Okay, Kathleen, you looked at the map up there on the boundaries, I know, that 374 units in place of 141, I believe that was the Firefly? Was that the Firefly development?
I'm sorry.
Where it says
Yeah,
374.
clarify this, 'cause I want to follow you.
This
Yeah.
one right here?
I understand where you're talking.
Right,
Yes.
that one.
Yes,
Okay.
that's Firefly.
Now, I know, you kind of see that, the dark boundary there that's laid, all of a sudden it stops, and then it starts again. Is that 374, is that Logan right now?
No, what that is we had approved that for PUD, and in the discussion with Mayor Daines.
Okay, but it is Nibley. It is on this side of 2200 South,
That's correct.
and that's Nibley, right? Okay, just kind of where that came together, I kept wondering, was that going back and forth?
Nibley City goes straight along there, except where it says 197 units. It jogs around that property. That is still county.
Yeah.
It's in no city.
The 249 no is Logan City west of the 374.
Yes.
Yes. Off the highway.
That's conjecture. That's zone rec. I mean, that's not zone commercial, it's not zone for mixed use. It's really nothing right now, and to suppose it's gonna be that level of density is wrong.
I'm sorry, that was based on weird names.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm going to ask another
Oh,
question.
please,
So-
we're in discussion.
So, in the primarily, the three principles that we're looking at here, once again, with the second principle and the conflict with the annexation, as we consider that, and in expanding on the comments you made earlier, are we allowed to still weigh the negative or the positive impacts of the future of the property on one municipality or the other?
I believe so, because you're not restricted. I don't see anything in there that restricts what you consider. I believe that a court would say you can't do it arbitrarily, capriciously, but you would need to have some reasonable basis for.
Financial, right? Didn't it say financial?
I don't read any
Nope.
financial.
No, there's no financial.
There's no financial.
So if we were to further discuss that second, the annexation conflict, if part of that discussion, if we were to identify positive or negatives, even in a resolution, that's gonna be acceptable?
I believe it would.
Okay.
In fact, I believe you'd have to identify positive and negatives so that you would have a justification for your decision. It would be, if it went to district court, your decision would have a harder time holding up if you don't give justifications for it. You would need to have some reasonable justification either way.
Chris, are you bringing up a map?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I kind of figured you would. Any other comments? Any other? Guess, if no decision is made, then we can actually postpone it. Then we would have to get together and they'd advertise again, but so it is completely up to us.
If we did do that, under what things would be considered, in your opinion?
That's a good question. I don't know, because I think we've probably been given all the information necessary for a decision, personally. So,
Well, taking that one step further, and I guess we're open for discussion. The way I see this, I fully respect the property rights of the owner. And in here in the history, it sounds like the property owner went to both municipalities. And I'm sure in that discussion, part of their decision possibly would have been on which was in their best interest. And if the zoning of one community allowed greater, that would tend to pull in that direction. And there's no guarantees that the future of the other municipality wouldn't benefit them the same. But even if we took today, what if both municipalities allowed the same density? I feel I feel it's extremely important that we recognize the property owner's rights. But at the same time, whatever decision is made, if that same zoning was to apply, there should be no loss to the property owner, regardless of the direction. Am I?
Perhaps, yeah.
And that's the part I'm struggling with, just knowing. I can tell you if I lived there, I'd have the same anxiety. I have anxiety just seeing all those apartments being built right now. Do you? Not because I don't want them, just because it's changing our value and our valley, and we need those buildings. It is what it is. It's the growth that's coming to our valley. So would I not like it either? I probably wouldn't. I don't know how to separate the use of the property and the zoning and the feelings that come with all of that from the annexation itself. And how does this body say, I'm not going to approve the annexation? And what's my reason? Because they should pay to take care of the parks. They should, to begin with, we don't know where those children are going to go to school. They might go to Wellsville. We've got children from North Lobe with me bus to Spring Creek in Providence. I don't know where they're going to go to school, and the school's not here to tell us that. They might go to Nibley, or they may have to build a brand new school somewhere else. I don't know. We don't know that. So we have a lot of assumptions. Mr. Housley made the comment of the crossing guards. Typically, crossing guards are hired by the cities in the cities where they are. So if this is that city, they're going to have crossing guards. Now, as they come closer to the schools, if they went to Nibley, then there's some responsibility on Nibley City. So there are some things that trade off. I understand all of that. I just don't know how to quantify it and separate it. I need somebody to help me with that. I don't know where we go with that.
With where you're going with your conversation, and I appreciate it, I just have to ask you, regardless of what school they go to, what have you though, do you feel because of the proximity to the position right there, that there would be a negative impact on the municipality to the south from increased roads, sidewalks, whatever else? Do you feel that that's, what do you think?
I think it's real. I don't think we can pretend like it wouldn't be there. I just don't know if we can hold up an annexation on that basis. Maybe we can. Increase traffic. I don't know. I don't know.
Well,
I don't know how to separate it.
ultimately,
Again,
they'd still come on
if
a
we
boat.
didn't know how that property was going to be used, would you have the same concerns?
Probably not.
If somebody
You
said
could.
it's going to remain a farm, growing Herefords, would you have the same concern? Would it bother you which city it goes into? Probably not. So I'm having trouble in my mind separating the two. Separating the annexation. If I lived there, I would have their same concerns. I have to tell you, in all honesty, I would. And I think any one of us would. Because it will have an impact on their city. There's no question about that. But is that something this body deals with? Or is that a planning and zoning issue within those cities, or city interlocal agreements to take care of some of those concerns? Is that our body, or I don't, John? I don't know.
Again, I think that the code gives you authority to, if that's your concern, to say no to the annexation. I think you have that authority. And again, I'm not saying that trying to weigh in on what it ought to be, but I think you have that authority.
To say no based on what?
I would, if I can interject.
Please.
Based on, it's in two different communities' plan. And so that opens the door that we can look at that. It can be in Nibley, it can be in Logan. Both of them desire it. And so if we can find a way to make that happen, it's our right and our duty to figure out what's best for this piece of property, whether it is to have mitigating things, going to Logan, or to Nibley, for some of the impacts, or say, okay, it's got to come out to the center of the road, and that way they're responsible and force them into some sort of an that would force the interlocal agreement if both of them meet up to the center of the road. So we've got either of those options that we can go down. But what my thought is it's in both, and so we're the arbitrator that decides which way it goes.
Kathleen?
Yes.
Maybe I'll answer it this way. I think that you're familiar with the feeling of protesting parties coming and not understanding that, man, they check all the boxes.
Sure.
And then the secondary feeling is, and why are we here? Because everybody ought to be able to tell if they check all the boxes.
Right.
you're here because of that subsection B, that even when somebody can check all the boxes, the state has said we're gonna have a boundary, commission, that when there's overlapping plans, they weigh in and kind of have a veto on the private property right of, I wanna be in this city, that you have a veto right on that. And I'm not going to pretend that I can predict exactly how the Utah Supreme Court would rule, and maybe they'd say that, no, that's not what's intended, but I can't read that language any other way.
Sure.
I would love to see some precedents, some examples of when it's all been checked in a body like this somewhere in Utah or somewhere in
And I've not done that research.
the United States has said, we're gonna use our authority and we're gonna say, it checks all the boxes, but we're gonna override it because of this. Cause I don't know if I'm smart enough right now to make that decision. And I don't have any historical precedents on even, on what basis they've even done that with, right?
In Cache County, we've had some cases, but typically they've been more legal issues. So what's happened as we've met with both of the opposing parties, they've worked through those things and resolved those legal issues
Before it came
prior
here.
to, we actually heard the case and then we met with both and worked through some of those to try to resolve some of the legal issues. I don't, yeah.
And I don't know how long ago, but they're at 2200 South, at 12th West, and to the left of that, to Highway 91, that little section that's actually this side of 2200 South, that is actually in Logan. Was that, did Nibley ever fight that, or did they?
I don't know the history there.
I don't know how
Kind of
long
curious,
it's been, I'd have to go.
it's kind of a jump down too, if you're going by natural, or was the cost of 2200 South too much to develop it that, or to build and?
I don't know.
I don't either, but I was just kind of curious if that was gonna be a natural barrier of 2200 South, which kind of looks like it has started that way. So being, you know, there's an old Bible story that talks about, hey, let's split the baby.
I think I've heard that one.
So you say, hey, Nibley comes in and says, hey, you give us this and you can have that. I don't know. You know, it's kind of, I hate to say it, but it's
And
a
all of a
crazy
sudden they
thing.
say, let's give it to Millville so we don't have to
Then,
split the baby.
then they turn around, don't want the baby split and it goes to Millville. So,
Do you want me to respond to that?
what's that?
Do you want me to respond to that, Chairman?
I don't know whether I do or not,
No,
John.
I can tell you that we did propose that. We asked Logan to come to the table
Yeah.
and discuss that
Well, it's,
before we filed the protest.
there's give and take. I think that's all commercial down there, isn't it?
It's really undeveloped.
Undeveloped then, yeah. Well, that would kind of clean everything up in a lot of ways, but you can't take the history and the changes and go forward, so. That tells me my time's up. Okay,
You see the history,
what's that?
that part that you were looking at? That gives a date of when that was annexed.
Right there, yeah.
what does it say?
2007.
2007.
2007.
And it's undeveloped?
I can give you the history if you want.
Could you, Kimber, real quick, if you know it?
Nibley did protest that. That was part of the annexation that when Logan came across Highway 89 to the east.
Yeah.
That was. So that was driven by the property owners at that time.
Okay.
They came into Logan. Nibley did protest actually. It's just, they allowed the annexation to go forward. Since then, though, we've disconnected a big chunk of that property, so it's not shown there. But it was part of that annexation that went from 2200 South all the way down to 3200 South where Ted is. We're still looking to get that one back to the county.
You sure? Guess why?
Okay, more thoughts, discussion, or motions?
I guess I'll be forthright. If we're asked to make a decision today, and as I already expressed earlier, I would want the property owner to have what is best for them, and I guess that's opening a whole nother can of worms, but if we took it from the financial standpoint, both communities allowed them the same potential. I have a concern with the negative impact being on the perimeter of Nibley City, even though Logan City's annex plan happened in 2007. Looking at it today, it's part of both of their plans, so based off of the second item, my concern is the negative impact, so I would have to lean towards either being opposed to the annexation to Logan or some sort of an arrangement where both communities were able to be compensated from the expansion to accommodate the expansion of people. That's my thoughts.
Good comment. Others?
So then would you be proposing then with a condition, you give them a period of time to come up with an agreement, or are you talking about, you know, I guess what would your remedy be then?
Well, I really, is it Mr. Lowe?
Commissioner Lowe, sure, am I a commissioner? Sure, I'll go with that.
I can't see your name, is it?
Yeah, David Lowe.
Dave Lowe.
Okay, so I appreciated all his questions, and it concerns me that this is handled appropriately from protecting the legal interests of the county. I don't know that we as a body, I don't feel comfortable saying what them conditions are. So if there were to be conditions, ultimately your idea of having the municipalities try and work them out may be best, along with the developer. I don't know, but I mean, I know I wouldn't be comfortable saying the conditions, but I just see that as
You're saying it would go
possible
back,
two options.
it would go back and they would just work it out?
Or you would say,
That would work.
if I'm understanding where you were going, is you would send them back to see if they can come up with an agreement, and then we meet at a future time to agree, to see if that meets the concerns.
Or if they could even resolve it together, which they may not be able to.
But then it would come back here, right?
It would,
I mean, it has to be annexed.
Do you want?
One way or the other.
Yes.
If we read section 416, you can approve the proposed annexation either with or without conditions. Unfortunately, the code doesn't tell us what the scope of those conditions are. I feel on more shaky ground on giving advice on what the scope of conditions is than in interpreting the other one. Whether you can say, we approve this as long as Logan agrees to the conditions that Nibley put up on the screen. Maybe the code is that broad. The court might say it's not that broad, but the code language isn't clear on that, and I have a harder time being as confident on that one. But certainly you can approve it, you can deny it and let them go work and come up with their own stuff if they can.
What does that mean? What does that mean?
Well, you can approve and you're done, of course.
Of course.
You can disapprove.
Disapprove.
And then they're back to just do what they do and you don't have to be involved. And what they might do is get together and talk and see if they can come up with a deal.
Let's say the landowner says, no, I want this to be annexed. It doesn't ever come back here.
Well, it depends.
Well, Logan
He
could-
can apply again.
Oh, they can
and it
apply
come
again.
back here.
Does it-
Apply for Nibley, and then see if Nibley
And we're back to
passes
school,
again,
huh?
and might be back here in front of you. You could approve it conditional on something and test the limits of your
Is there,
authority to
Again,
impose
is there
conditions.
space to,
I don't-
you know, to table it and give them, say, a month to come up with an agreement?
But the agreement, then, once they make the agreement, they'd come back here.
And then we would,
Our agreement,
then we would either approve it or
At that
disapprove.
point, you would probably be out of the loop, because the agreement would probably be, we've got an arrangement, and so Nibley has
So it would
withdrawn
withdraw.
their objection.
yeah, without an objection, there is no meeting,
Right.
right?
Right.
Which is what most of,
So
all of the, which most annexations happen that way, correct? I mean, without an objection,
they just happen,
they just happen,
yes.
yeah, so,
So Nibley would need to withdraw their opposition, and then the agreement's done, if they could, but it doesn't sound like that's
and so.
gone down that road and it hasn't had success.
So let's talk about all the things we can do. We cannot approve it. And on what basis are we doing that?
That it's in two municipalities in their declaration zone.
So are we, is this body, because this isn't the first one you're going to see, are you going to disapprove all of the annexations that come that are in two
Because
annexation
90% of them
plans?
will be that, right?
That's right.
Yes. I think you have to look at it on a case by case. The school district deal, I guess, that's one of my hangups.
Explain the hang-up, so I understand it.
Okay,
As you
so
understand it.
to start with, safety of the children, I mean, we've already got the 367 or whatever they keep referring to. What sidewalks do we see going in along the sides of them roads to accommodate those kids? Who's putting that in to make sure that them kids get to school safely? I don't see anything.
And we really can't look at those things.
Okay, so
That's all
pretend
part
it-
of, that's all part of your approval process that goes through in,
Thank you.
in your, development services areas,
Okay,
you know,
thank
they're the
you.
ones that say, hey, if you're gonna do this, we're gonna require you to
We're all
do this.
talking, now we're going into.
And this is good because this is exactly what I want us to do.
Pretend I didn't say that then,
No,
but I
no,
still
that-
have a hangup.
That's a
because-
good comment, because I think we have to weed through all of this to know what our real authority is.
Okay.
I think we all have the same hangups,
So it'd be the
but we
mitigation
have to
of
say,
the
is that
costs.
something this board can take care of?
No, that's, it really isn't, that's really what needs to be put back into their own development services area, and if they don't put it in them, then hey, the same people should be out there protesting, hey, you know, the approval of that plat, because hey, it doesn't include these things. The school district should be in there saying, hey, you can't do this, we gotta get these kids to school safely. That's part of the process hereafter.
And I
But
think
then
you're,
with-
I think you're hitting on exactly the boundaries of your discretion, as I listen to you.
Would
think
Nibley
about it. You
citizens
can't-
have a
you can't
standing in
say-
the Logan, you know, so say this is approved and they have concerns about the safety of all of that, would a Nibley citizen have standing to voice all of that in a different municipality?
But what we don't know is where those children are gonna go to school. Maybe they're gonna be bused to Wellsville. The College Board kids are bused to Millville. Maybe they'll go to Millville.
No College Board kids.
Where do they go now? Where did they used to go?
Mountainside or to.
Mountainside.
But all of this is zoned for Nibley Elementary, which is right next to.
Right. But the school district, as you know, changes. I'm just saying, I'm not saying yes or no. I'm just saying that we don't know that yet.
Okay.
That's something that the school district will have to decide, and they do it all the time in
Yeah,
changing
they do.
boundaries for schools. They have to look at the population of each school and say, gosh, we need more kids in River Heights. Boom, we're gonna send y'all to River Heights. And you go, where'd that come from? North Logan's coming to Spring Creek.
Hiram goes to Millville.
Yeah, so it happens all the time. They change the boundaries, and they have to do it based on the population of the schools. So again, we're weeding into something, I think it's a concern we all have. So our second option then is to approve it as it is, and on what basis would we do that? Our third option is to approve it with some conditions. What conditions? Do you know enough about what conditions you want to say? We want you to split the tax increment that you get. I don't.
What's your thought on that, where you're bringing it up? Do you feel there's room for that?
I don't, because I don't know how to quantify it. personally. I really don't. Like I said, if I lived there, I'd have the very same concern. I don't know how I can quantify it.
And
Where do I go with it? How do I say, this is what I want you to do? I mean, it's always better if they work it out on their own and we aren't involved, for everyone. But I go back to a comment you made earlier. I really look toward ownership of property and their request. Nobody's forcing it. They went to Logan City for a reason. They went there asking. They did what they were supposed to. It's unfortunate they didn't go to Nibley. I don't know how to resolve that issue. And maybe that happens.
You know, and your comment about, you know, and where the impact of those residents in that particular development is going to be. If we start becoming too nitpicky on where we recreate, on where we show ownership to what entity or whatever it may be. I live in the county. Where I recreate is probably more in Smithfield Parks, but I'm in the county. Pretty soon, do I have to start paying more because I'm gonna go to a Smithfield Park?
You should.
I should.
Well, I remember the Logan.
Now, the last time I said something, it cost me about, it's about $7 or $8 a
not
month in
charging
garbage. So, so I gotta be careful there. But serious, you know, if there's economic impact, usually when we develop, like put the Lees in Smithfield, we have Hyde Park residents that come to that drive on those roads through Smithfield, then we do get a return because they're spending money in Smithfield. You know, recreation, schools, these kind of things, there's not a whole lot of return. Okay. But yet, you know, you can't really school choice. There's people that drive from the south in the valley that go to Skyview High School. Should they be paying Logan City for, you know, a toll because we're driving through on your roads for school? I mean, when we start getting a little bit too nitpicky on these kind of things, I think you gotta be real careful, you know, as to specifically where.
We always run into hypocrisy there.
Yeah, and so, so everything seems to be pushing us right back to a little bit more on, I guess, that the private property's choice, the private property owner's choice, and then the entities start adapting from there. Now, if they put their own tolls in and stuff like that, I don't know. I wouldn't suggest that, but or if Logan says, you know, I want to be the best neighbor to Nibley, you can have that property over there. I dare you, Kimber.
We have a committee that's meeting supposedly trying to work out those boundary issues, so they haven't had any success to date, but.
That committee has refused to meet for 3 months because Logan won't come.
Okay. Anyway, but, you know, anyway, you know how I feel, those kind of things. But, so really what comes down to us is we're starting to narrow up really what our decision really could or should be, personally.
Kathleen,
So,
you were delineating, and then we cut you off.
Well, that's all right. I think we can either disapprove completely, we walk away. We can approve it as it is, or we can approve it with some conditions. And I think we have to be able to quantify and justify the conditions we would place on it. What are those conditions? Now, Nibley's offered some. Require sharing the impact fees and tax revenues. I can tell you from a taxation standpoint, 70% of the taxes that's going to come from that property goes to the schools. So Cache County School is going to get it. So wherever their children go, they're going to get the money. And they have to find a school for them, wherever that is. Whether they have to bus them, whether they are going to go to Nibley. I doubt the 2 schools that are there can handle that many more. You're going to have to build another one. So those kinds of things are going to come. The next largest portion goes to Cache County Corporation. So whether the property's annexed or not, Cache County still gets their pot. The next portion goes to the city. So there's an increment that's going to go to Logan City instead of to Nibley City, but it's a small amount. And I think both of you would agree that when you develop residential property, the amount of incremental tax that the city gets from that home in no way pays for the services rendered by the city. It is pittance. So if we think that you can put in all of those apartments and that tax increment's gonna pay for the impact on the city on that property, you are sorely mistaken. The only way those properties make it is if they're commercial. Commercial pays for itself. Residential property gets 45% right off the top. So 45% of the tax is gone. So now we're splitting the rest of it up. So in a city that's strictly residential, those cities struggle. They don't have a commercial tax base, the sales tax revenue. That's what keeps them afloat. That's what helps them through all of this. So when we talk about that, the citizens, the person who owns that property is going to pay more in taxes because Logan City's rate is higher than Nibley's rate right now. That could change. So they're going to pay a little more in taxes to be in Logan than in Nibley City. But the increment that comes from that property is minute in the big picture because the bulk of the tax goes to the schools. So when we talk about, you know, again, does it impact the city? Absolutely. I think Logan City would agree with that. It's going to impact. When you have something like that happening, there's going to be an impact. There's no question. And how do we resolve it? You would hope that cities and property owners would come together and come to a resolution. Hey, we've got this problem. We've got to figure out what we do with all this traffic or how we're going to handle this, or we've got to have sidewalks for these children to walk on. All of those kinds of things. And again, it goes back to their planning and zoning. What's required? They've got to have 20% of the property in parks. I don't know what that means, but apparently that's in part of their planning and zoning. So for us to surmise what that might be, I don't know what that is.
So, if we make a motion, then we can vote, and then we'll know
Would
either
you
way.
two be comfortable expressing your thoughts? You two.
Express my thoughts.
Well, then I guess the other thing that we got is we got to have 3 members agree with one way or another. If we don't have that, then
We've
the
got a
other
quorum,
option is
right?
we do have that, but we'd have to have 3 votes, one way or the other, to advance it.
Absolutely.
Unless, then again, brings back the table it for the other, the other 2 if we're at an impasse.
Mr. Chair, I believe you need 4 votes.
Oh,
You-
4?
You can.
Oh, you gotta have a-
You can conduct business with a quorum, but you still have to make a decision.
4
as a
out of 7,
majority
so we have to
of
have,
the commission.
got to have 4 votes on whatever is proposed, which could be difficult.
There must be 4 out of 5, you said?
You've got to have a
There
majority
are
of the
7
full
on the body,
commission.
so we've got to have 4 of this.
Oh,
You can do
Oh, wow.
business, you can do business as a quorum, but you still have to have a majority vote of the commission.
oh, wow.
There is one more issue that kind of keeps jumping up in the back of my mind, is multifamily housing tends to, and Logan deals a lot with this. I think you guys are really, really high in kind of a transient nature of rentals, of things like that. And when towns deal with they start getting a transient in and out. They're not in the homes very long. They're not in the apartments, whatever they are. Then that does have an impact on, portions of that city. And so, but that's just a thought that keeps hitting me. I hear a lot of towns that kind of complain, and they try to stay away from as many apartments as possible, as many as multifamily dwellings, because of that transient nature that you get, the high turnover. They're in there, they're not establishing really families that are gonna be there a long time. They're in there a short period of time, hit and run, school, whatever it may be. And it sometimes can be taxing on a community as far as keeping that community feel for, towns and cities.
Either way, whether it's in Logan or in Nibley, they're agreeing that it's going to be high density.
Yeah.
And so that probably doesn't have it's out there, but it's going to happen whichever entity
Right now, Nibley
has it.
does not have a whole lot of that issue.
But the smaller cities, like the Hirams and the Nibleys, and that's right, they would have residents that would be more opposed to this sort of thing, where Logan, they have more, they're more used to, they have a lot more a lot more of those types of,
That's
zoning.
just something that keeps hitting me on that kind of development that happens there.
But I don't think
It can usually have the biggest impact on the entity that is closest to it.
Right, okay. But I don't think we have any basis to do anything there on that subject.
What's your thoughts on this?
Well, my thoughts are, I think we gotta be very careful that we don't overlook the absolute need to remember that there's laws that also protect, there's laws that protect cities and there's laws that protect property owners. And I think we gotta be very careful that we don't try to change that or manipulate that or get influenced too much by, it's just difficult. They're tough issues. They really are. But I do think we probably should make a motion and see where we're at. I think we should, I'll make a motion that we approve the annexation.
Is there a second? It's been moved and seconded that we approve the annexation. Is there any discussion on this motion? Hearing none?
With no conditions,
With no conditions?
Just as written. Doesn't have to come out to the side of the road. It's just on the face. You're good with it is what the motion is.
It does come out to midpoint of the road.
Okay, so what do you understand?
And we're talking about the road on 2200.
We got
I can promise you it'll come to the middle of the road, because when you come to county council, I can promise you, they will deny it really fast if you're only gonna take half the road. You know how that goes. We become very, very adamant.
The property line is the middle of the road.
The property line
Yes.
is in the middle.
With right-of-ways,
Until it's
so,
annexed.
and you'll be absorbing everything we know, so.
So I don't know what conditions I would put on it, so I would have to say no conditions.
Any more discussion on the motion? Hearing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor say aye.
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 I will say aye. Nay? Nay?
Aye. Nay.
2 nays? 3 ayes. That is not enough to pass.
Yeah, and I just looked that up again. A majority of the commission constitutes a quorum, and commission action requires a majority vote of the commission.
So, therefore, it is defeated. So, okay. At that point, is there any further discussion?
So now what?
We got either something to change our mind, or we,
Well, you haven't disapproved it either.
no, we haven't.
It's true.
We're
So
st-
I think you either need to continue deliberating until you can take action, or you're statutorily required to come to a decision within a certain amount of time, and Janine and I could find that.
Certain amount of time tonight?
No.
Oh,
That you can postpone
This
for.
is an all-nighter.
this is an all-nighter. I'm ready. Bring it.
I hope you brought your
we don't leave.
Kim,
Okay,
You've got to have your initial meeting notice within 30 days, and then you can continue for up to 60 days beyond that initially noticed one. So you could continue the meeting and deliberate further, or you can continue tonight until you're able to take action as required.
okay, I just have one comment wants to be made real quick. Kimber, you had an idea?
You do have the option to continue it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we know that, okay. So we can continue it until the next meeting, which will be noticed and held accordingly.
And then we'd have the two
And
other.
hopefully we have.
And then we have more, which may add to
Yep.
greater
Yeah.
And then we're here for
in discussion.
all night and plus.
Point of clarification, is that continuing the public hearing also, or just
No,
the decision?
I believe we wouldn't, when we've done this in the past.
There would be no change because the public hearing's already been conducted on, the,
Not required, I just want to.
Yeah.
It would be a public
Say,
meeting,
it wouldn't
but
be
no public
required,
hearing.
they have a discretion to hold another hearing if they wanted, but they don't have a requirement to.
But
Public hearing.
certainly open to hear more So how would that still be available? I mean,
I don't know, there's more.
we've learned everything we need to learn?
If you want to hear more, I would recommend that you schedule a further
delegation.
hearing when you reconvene, that you have more of a hearing if you want to hear more.
Okay, I get it.
We can ask for presentations, couldn't we, if we wanted to, rather than open it up for a public hearing?
I'm just thinking about the two who didn't
Yeah.
hear the presentation.
Absolutely.
They
I'm
ought to hear
comfortable with
the-
hearing and may have
more
some questions
presentations.
as I mull through everything
Me
again.
too.
But
Wise.
I'm worried about them. I think it's unfair for them to make a decision without knowing. And maybe after they go through all of the documents, maybe they're comfortable making a decision. I don't know that.
Are we missing 3?
So what's your concern?
Just the two who aren't here. When we
Oh.
reconvene the meeting, I would
So
like for
Mr.
them.
Hunsaker
Yeah.
is not.
Oh,
going
Mr.
to
Hunsaker
participate at
can't,
all.
he has a conflict of interest, so,
Recused himself,
Yeah.
so you've got one other.
so basically one.
I think
So
it's
all
probably,
up to him.
oh boy. I do think, in all fairness, he's got to have an opportunity to hear and to listen and to consider.
To have to make a decision.
Sure.
2 delegations, is that what you're proposing?
Okay, so we will, open it up then for a, presentations from each side again at the next meeting. Do we want a public hearing? That's not, that's,
Probably ought to take a motion on that.
okay, someone make that motion, or if you want a public hearing, we can take that motion
Make a
too.
motion to have Logan and Nibley participate in the next, I'll make a motion to, at the future meeting, to have delegations from Nibley City and Logan City to present their case.
Second.
Moving second, we will have presentations from both sides.
We probably ought to then have a motion to continue the meeting.
All those in favor of that motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Continue, I'm in favor.
And how about continuing? Would you make that motion?
You bet. I would
Okay.
make a motion that we continue this meeting. Do you have a time in mind that we could,
Based on
According to
my notice.
statute,
according to
You
statute?
ought to work with your schedules and Janine
we'll go,
Okay.
to include.
According to,
according to statute.
according to statute, I would make a motion that we continue this meeting.
Second. Anyone?
Right.
Seconded over there. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, this meeting is now adjourned. We'll keep working on this.
Thank you, guys.
Oh, you bet.